Good evening, everyone. We're delighted to have you here for our Mersault and Other Villages tasting with Antoine Jobard and Charles Ballot from Domaine Antoine Jobard and Domaine Ballot-Millot, both based in Mersault. We're joined as well by Garrod, as usual, my partner in crime, who will be helping us ask lots of questions, hopefully from you all. And remarkably, we've got Mr. Tom Bird in charge of everything technical. So no doubt things will run very smoothly. We're hoping all those of you who were at the Dujac event last week, we're hoping the internet signal in Mersault is rather better than it was in Maurice Saint-Denis. But we've got some great wines to taste this evening. In a moment, I'm just going to ask both Charles and Antoine just to give a brief history of each of the domains. And then once they've done that, we'll begin the tasting. We've got 3 wines from each of them. 2 Lieu-dit Mersauts, hopefully to show the difference between the different plots of Mersault. Then 2 Premier Cru Mersauts. And then we're off to Chassagne and Poligny. So we're having a little tour of the Côte de Beaune. We're focusing this evening on 2 vintages. 2017, which is obviously a great vintage, and also 2015, which I know is one of Antoine's favourite vintages, where he made some particularly special wines. So it should be a great tasting. As usual, please do type in questions as we go along, and Garrod will do his best to read out the most interesting ones, the most pertinent ones. We've got about an hour, as usual. The English may be interspersed with a little bit of French along the way, so hopefully that will all make sense to everybody. But let's get cracking. I think we're all here now. So Charles, if I can come to you first, if you just give a very brief history of Domaine Ballot-Millot and a little bit of your philosophy on vinification and viticulture.
Okay, so hello everybody. Good evening. So the domain was built in about 1680. So the first vines we bought at this moment, and today all of the domain is coming from different family, from my father and from my mother, a small part from my mother, with a very nice vines, and so we are in Mersault since a very long time, since maybe 80 years old maybe, and before we was in Chassagne a little bit and in Pommard. And we make different vines from Chassagne to Beaune, with many Mersault, mostly in Mersault, and small parcels in Volnay. So I just arrived in 2000 in the domain. Before I had a small study in Beaune. And after I traveled a little bit in US and in New Zealand before I came back in 2000. My father had different things to do out of the domain, and he told me you can follow the next vintage, and if it's okay for you, you can stay and you can do by yourself. So I started in 2000, and it works not too bad, I think. So I continue like this. And now the domain is, so we we try to progress every year, of course, like everybody, I think. And we try to go in the good way, with a good respect of the environment, with the best respect, and the philosophy is not, we are not in biologic actually, but we try to go in this way, and the vinification is quite long vinification compared to before to what my father did, and so we let in barrels during 12 months, and we put after the racking in September, we put in tanks for 6 months more, and we will put in bottles in March, February, March, with after a small collage and very soft filtration. So.
Right. Thanks, Charles. Well, you can explain a little bit more in detail when we come back to the wines shortly. Yeah. So if I could just ask Antoine the same question, a brief history of the estate and when you joined, and anything specific that you do in the vineyards or as regards vinification. We can talk about vinification in greater detail later. So more about the history of the domain.
Okay. Hello everyone. I'm Antoine Jobard. I'm a winemaker since '98. I come back in the domain after the school in Beaune of viticulture. My domain was built in 1860, and it's not very old, but it was my grandfather. Today we have 7 hectares in white wines, in Chardonnay, in Mersault, Puligny, and Saint-Aubin now. We have since last August, I had an opportunity to have some red wines, and I have 6 hectares more. So today I have 13 hectares. And in red wine, it's in Volnay, Pommard, and Beaune. So the culture, I was very lucky because my father never used some chemical products, and it was only with sulfur and cuivre. So we are certified organic since 2019 harvest with EcoCert, and yeah, I hope to have some new vines, but today I have 4 premiers crus in Mersault. It's Mersault Charme, Mersault Genévrière, Mersault Poruso, and Mersault Blany. One premier cru in Puligny-Montrachet, Les Changuins. We will taste 17 in a few minutes. And I have also Saint-Aubin premier cru, Les Perrières, derrière chez Édouard, and sur le sentier du Clou, and also a little bit of Mersault Village and Bourgogne Blanc. Okay, perhaps red wine, a few minutes. Red wine, the new vines are in Volnay Village, Pommard Village, Pommard Pézerolles, Pommard Les Saucy, Pommard Epneau, and in Beaune Montrevenot and Beaune Epnot in premier cru, and a little bit of Bourgogne Rouge.
Antoine, what the first vintage of the red wine will be
19.
19.
Yeah, but very small production, because the vines was not very perfect, and I need to have 3-4 years before a good production. But In 19, I had only 8, 9 hectoliters by hectare. So very, very small. Yeah.
Hopefully it was a bit higher for the white wines.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Antoine. We'll talk in greater detail as we go on. And as Antoine said, we will be tasting his Polini Champgat at the end of the tasting. So we'll go back to Charles to kick off. This is one of my favourite lieux-dits in Mersault. It's the Mersault Narvaux 2017 from Domaine Ballot-Millot. Everyone's samples actually come out of a Magnum, as we no longer have any bottles. And just to show solidarity, Charles is tasting out of a Magnum as well.
Yeah, the same.
Which of course he will no doubt finish later this evening. So
yeah, maybe.
Us a little bit about the vineyard of Narvaux and a little bit about the 2017 as a vintage and anything interesting about this specific wine.
So yeah, Mersault Narvaux. So it's labeled. See. Mersault Narvaux, it's very nice place. It's just on the bottom of the Lieu-dit Les Narvaux, which is a more red soil, and we are just over the Premier Cru, between Genévrière and Porizo, but just over. And so it's not the same concentration. It's just very nice balance, nice situation, because it's a little bit colder in general in Les Narvaux. A little bit more wind, but it's very nice situation with many trees and a lot of rocks, and it's a very nice biotope. So the terroir is very good. It's a red soil with, it's not a deep soil, but it's with many rocks. So we have a very good balance with the minerality and the freshness and the fruit. 17, it's a little bit at this moment a little bit exotic, I think, and we have a small reduction. Is going back in bottles for each appellation, and it was very good vintage. It was it's definitely a very good vintage with quite not very big production for us, but a good concentration, very nice acidity, very good maturity, and just a perfect balance, I think. And yeah, we are very lucky about the last three vintage.
I was just going to ask, in terms of new oak, Charles, how much have we got on the Narvaux?
It's not a lot. It's about 20% of new oak. So we try to put new oak, but I like to keep the oldest barrels. So I have in general between 15 to 30% of new oak, 30% in Perrières, in Chassagne, Mersault. But in general, I don't put too much because I want to keep the reduction in the barrels. And the last few years, I mean in 14, 13, the very low production. We had a bigger concentration of new oak, and we lost a little bit of reduction, I think, during the élevage, and it coming back usually in tanks, but I like really much the reduction in barrels. So we try to have a good balance with the old and the young wood, and we try to choose the best oak with a very finest wood, with a tonnelier which a good job for very small, very light toast and long toast at low temperature.
You just touched on reduction there. Could you just explain exactly what you mean by that and why you like to work with reduction in the purification process?
The reduction, you will have the reduction with the lees, with the élevage with the lees, and with the if you don't addition some oxygen. The most important is like this. We will oxidate the juice at the beginning after the press, but after when the fermentation is beginning, we will stop all the aeration. So we'll do no more bâtonnage. All the racking will be without aeration. So we will have more gas, more CO2, and the élevage with the lees. We keep all the lees after the press. We don't make a débourbage. So after the fermentation, we will have a bigger and bigger reduction. The reduction is very nice because the wine will be a little bit closer at the beginning when you open the bottles, but after a few years, I mean, the last vintage, I had a lot of reduction, maybe a little bit too high. It was 2008, but actually it's very fresh. It's very exotic. It's very fruity. I like it really much. It was very it's very good. The reduction is very good. The reverse of the reduction is the oxidation. So we want to take care with that. So we prefer to have a little bit too much reduction than oxidation. I have a big fly.
There's been a question, Charles, from Stannery Wines, for both you and Antoine, about the true character of Mersault. So a generation ago, or even in the last 20 years, Mersault was for more rich, rounded, heavier styles of white wine. But in recent years, the style has been more mineral, more fresh, more pure. What do you see that stylistic change yourself as being driven by your generation of winemakers? Were they doing something completely different 20, 30 years ago to make those sort of richer, more sort of bigger styles of Chardonnay? What are your thoughts on that on that shift, on that change in this last sort of 10, 15 years?
I think the style changed a lot. Maybe after 98, 96, 97, for my opinion, but we had many problems of oxidation, and we had to find many solutions. And actually, it's before 2000, we made more bâtonnage, more aeration, and the vinification was very short. And now it's very different. We just want to keep the nature of the identity of the soil. So that's very important. Many people said Mersault must be very big, very round, and very rich, etc. But in fact, it's not the terroir of Mersault. Mersault, it's maybe more generous because the soil is drier than the other village in general. The water in the soil is really deeper in Mersault, but the minerality it's very big in Mersault. In the all the Isle of Perrières, Genévrières, Charmes, the low part of the Isle is very we have a very big minerality. Chaume de Narvaux as well, it's a big minerality. So we had the minerality, but we changed it quite the style 20 years ago, before 20 years ago. So the style changed, but I think in the good way, in the way of the style of the terroir, of the way of the terroir.
So it's the interpretation of yourself and the younger winemakers. That's sort of, yeah, the terroir was to make the mineral fresh style. It's, yeah, just an evolution of the way to make the wine.
Yeah, and all the winemaker want to, I think, biggest part of the winemaker want to go in the to respect the terroir and to make wine from the terroir. Not every winemaker has a style, but of course, but everybody want to give the best representation of the terroir, I think.
Just quickly, before we move on to Antoine's first wine, Charles, when would you say would be the perfect time to start drinking this Narvaux 17?
Not now. It's not. It's very early. And in Magnum too. I like Narvaux after, I think after 10 years. It's perfect. It will be good. We test Narvaux with 10 years old. It's still very fresh and it's very nice appellation. It's a big concentration in Narvaux compared to Cryo, for example, which is really lighter and very straight and very incisive. And Narvaux it's really big and need more maturity. And yeah, 10 years, I think it's very good. Of course, you can open it before in 3-5 years with you can decant it, and it will be great. But yeah, it's better to wait. It's better to wait.
Great, thank you, Charles.
Welcome.
Antoine, over to you. So your first wine is the Mersault Laitier, another famous Lieu-dit Mersault, but it's the 2015 vintage. So again, if you could talk a little bit about 2015, how it's different to the 17, and also a little bit about the character of Laitier, and also how your vinification is different to Charles.
Okay, Mersault Laitier, I have not label. I'm sorry. Mersault Laitier, it's not too far to Narvaux. It's the same altitude, but when you see the coast, perhaps it's more in the north of Mersault, and it's perhaps colder to Narvaux. You have more freshness, more acidity, perhaps, but it's a little bit similar. 2000, yes, I have in TA I have 0.70 hectare, and I produce usually 4,500 bottles each year. And 2015 for me was the first vintage who I changed the vinification. Why? Because after since 2003 the weather is very, very hot. The particularity of the wines are very big maturity, very low acidity. And after 2003, after 2009, I went in 15, keep the freshness, keep the CO2, and I change before I use 22 months in barrels with 15% of new oak, and in 15 I had only 1 year in barrel, but 1 year in barrel, and after 8 months in tank, in inox tank. So it was only 1 winter in barrels, because the problem with barrels is it's very important, it's very good, but after fermentation, alcoholic fermentation and malolactic fermentation, in the second winter, you lost a lot of CO2 and freshness. So when you have not a lot of acidity, it's very important to keep the freshness. So I change in 15, and with second winter in tank, I add more reduction, more freshness, and it was very important for me. Today, it's good. It's perhaps too early to taste now, 15, perhaps in 1-2 years, it will be good. But if you taste now, you can decant a little bit, just not for a long time, but 10 minutes, 10 minutes with oxygen, it will be good. Yes, and now for me, 2015 was very good, because it was after 2012, 13, and 14. We had a lot of problem with the hail in these 3 years, and after 15 was very good for me. We made 45, 50 hectoliters by hectare, so it was very good. And the balance is good. It was good maturity, but it's not too heavy. And sometimes you can have some climat, some terroir more heavy, but in TA it's very, very fresh, because it's very high. It's at 300 meters, so it's colder. It's yeah, it's fresh.
Can you remember what date you began Les Vendanges in 2015?
I don't remember exactly, but I think it was the first day of September. I think it was the 3rd September, but I'm not sure. But yes, it's the beginning of September. And since 03, we have a lot of vintage very early. You have 03, 11, 07. 07 was very early. 11, 15, 17, 18 too. So yeah, and 2020 will be very early to perhaps 25, 28 August. So the problem is March. Since 15 years, the months of March and April are very, very hot. 20 years ago, we had a lot of rain, a lot of, it was not frost, but it was colder. But since 20 years, it's very, very hot. And you can to see the change of the weather. Yeah. With the vines, you see that very yeah.
Well, this 2015 has wonderful freshness, and you don't sense that it was a very hot vintage. A lot of the 2015s that I've tasted have seemed incredibly stable, and I think it's just slightly unfortunate that it came after 2014, which is obviously a great vintage. But I think there'll be some really nice surprises with 2015. I think it's a vintage people should go back and have another look at, because I think, as we see with wines like this, and hopefully we'll see with Blagny 15 a bit later, it's a really terrific vintage. And I can see why you like it so much.
Yeah. For me, 15 is very easy for me. I like very much the vintage with big maturity. 14 is good too, but the balance is very different. When you start the testing with 14, it's very fine. It's a little bit acid. 15, it's you have a big mouth in starting, and but after you have the freshness, and I like it because I like the wines with a big mouth, and it's not too flat or too no. I like it, and it's interesting if the wines is fresh after in the end of the testing, because if it's too heavy, you lost the interest of the wines. You can't drink a bottle at 2 or 3 people. It's too. Yes, you are very tired after 2 or 3 glasses. So 15, it's not like that. It's interesting. It's very full, but it's very fresh.
I think it will be really fascinating in 5 years' time to drink 14 and 15 in the same evening, because I think there'll be some really good surprises about 2015.
Yeah.
Thank you, Antoine.
Welcome.
So it's time to move on to Charles's second wine, which was the Mersault Genévrier. I have to say, there's almost none of this left in the UK. It was quite difficult to track down a few bottles from our warehouse, but luckily we managed to get just enough for this evening. I'm hoping Charles managed to find a bottle in his cellar. I know his stock is getting very low. That looks like another Magnum. But
no.
over to you, and if you could, whilst you're talking about Genévrier, maybe you could also just touch a little bit about Perrier as well, because I know we have people who, some prefer Perrier, some prefer Genévrier, and you obviously make both.
So the Genévrier, it's maybe the most famous appellation in Mersault. This parcel is the oldest from the domain. So the vines are 80 years old about. We try to keep it very for a long time because it's still good, it's still alive. So it's very important for us to keep the structure of these parcels. The soil is maybe, I say, is maybe the most typical in Mersault, because it's quite the blending of all the different style of the soil of Mersault. It's like a millefeuille in French. It's a special cake in French. You see the soil. It's so many difference in the soil. If you cut the soil, you will have many different style of soil, of rock, of gray. That's amazing of concentration of complexity, this soil. So we are just on the Mersault Genevrière du dessus. So just beginning almost, the parcel is beginning almost flat and going up on the height, and you will have a very different soil from the beginning of the parcel to the top of the parcel, to the end of the parcel. So in Genevrière, you will have the biggest complexity. Sometimes it's close in bottles, in the nose and the mouth. It's quite close at the beginning in bottles. It need more time than Perrier, I think, more and more. Need more time in bottles to aging. It's the complexity. It's always quite the same. You will have more and more complexity after a few years. It will be very large and very rich and very opulent, and but it will be always very fresh with a flower nose compared to Perrier, which is more fruity. Genevrière, it's more white flower, white mushroom sometimes when it's very old, and Perrier, it's completely different soil. It's very close. The parcel is still very close. It's at maybe 300 meters. So it's still very close, but the soil, the situation is quite little bit different. The orientation from the soil, from the sun, it's little bit different, and the soil is completely different. The rock is very compact, very hard for the I lost the name. Pour les racines, it's very hard to the roots. Thank you. It's very hard to go deep in Perrier because the rock is very hard, and it's a white soil. So it's more little bit warmer in Perrier than Genevrière, because during the day the sun going in the rock, in the white rock, and going back in the leaves, in the grapes, and the temperature is still a little bit higher, and during the night as well. So in Genevrière we had a quite good production. We make 0.5 hectares for almost quite the same in Perrier. We have a little bit more in Perrier than Genevrière. Perrier, it's a younger vines. It's 50 years old, but it's always very small grapes. It's so nice. The harvest is so nice in Perrier because the style of grapes, it's always very small grapes and small berries. It's like almost like a caviar. And in 17, the harvest was so nice. In the press, it was all the same berries and just very small berries. We have always big concentration. We have more. The plant, it's quite special. It's more techniques. It's we plant these parcels in SO4. I mean for the Perrier, and the maturity is going very fast. It's a kind of plant which is in general very fast for the maturity. So we will pick first in general. First day or second days of the harvest, we'll pick a Perrier, and we have usually almost 1 degree left in Perrier than Genevrière or Charme. But Perrier, it will be very different style with much more minerality. It's a little bit higher in alcohol, but you cannot feel it. It's because it's so fresh. It's very is very straight. It's very intense. It's not large like Genevière, but it's more elegant. It's very straight and very always very long in the mouth.
I mean, this is a gorgeous wine. The complexity is amazing, and actually, it's almost more accessible than the Narvo. It's already so pleasurable. In terms of new oak, how much is on here? How much? What percentage?
It's a 30% of new oak in Genevière. We can have a difference. It's very complex. Genevière, it's always very complex and very concentrate, and you can feel. We can imagine it's more open than Genevière or different other appellation than Narvo, sorry, or different other appellation, but it's really complex. So it looks more open, but in reality, it needs more time and more aeration to be open.
Charles, if anyone's lucky enough to have 2017 Genevière or Perrier, what's the ideal drinking window? Is that 5 to 10 years or more or less? Or?
I think more. It's better to wait. It's vintage for keep. Huh? So yeah, it's better to keep it. Maybe 15, 20 years, but it depends of the cellar. And we like to drink it just for at the beginning of a dinner. We like to drink a 17 actually. We just put in carafe and there we go. So yeah, you just need aeration, and it's many people like to drink a young wine, but it's definitely a wine for keep it. You can drink it almost now. But yeah, if you can wait just 5 years, it's perfect. But you can keep definitely for a long time.
I think people find it hard. They get impatient to try them. So
yeah, it's for that I say that.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you, Charles. So back to you, Antoine, for wine number 4. This is your Premier Cru Mersault. It's again the 2015, which should make a nice comparison against ATA, and it's the Premier Cru Blagny.
Yes, Mersault Blagny. Mersault Blagny, my father bought the vines in 74. It was the first vintage at the Domaine. He bought old vines. So today the vines I'm not sure, but between 70, 75 years old. Before it was different parcel. I had red wine, Pinot. It was Blagny la pièce sous bois, and a parcel with Chardonnay, Mersault Blagny. And after the 06 harvest, we stopped the red wine, and we replant in all the vines in Chardonnay. So now we have half old vines and half new vine. So it's the blend of the vine. The wine is the blend of the two parcels, and it's Blagny. It's just above, behind Mersault Perrier. You have Mersault Blagny and Puligny Blagny. It's a small village between Puligny and Mersault. But it's not very famous, Premier Cru, but it's higher to Mersault Perrier. but 20 years ago, it was very the harvest was very late because it was colder, it was very fresh, and the harvest was perhaps 1 week after Premier Cru, Perrière, Genévrière, or Charme, and we had a lot of acidity. Now, since 20 years, 15 years, the weather changed a lot in Blagny because it's an amphitheater, and when the weather is very hot, it's more hot in Blagny than other cru because you have not wind. And the afternoon of June, July, August, it's very, very hot. And the soil is it's a mix of limestone and clay, but at above the parcel, you have a lot of clay, white clay, because you have the forest, the trees above the parcel, and you have a large band of clay in Mersault, like Tillet, like Narvaux-Dessus, like Blagny, like Les Clous. You have a large band of clay, but just below you have a lot of limestone, and you have always a freshness in this wine, always, and the maturity is since 20 years, 15 years. The harvest is before it was at the end of my harvest. Since 15 years, it's the first harvest. The first day I will go in the Blagny, La Pièce-sous-Bois. So it's 15 like a Tillet. I explained the vintage one time, but it's similar with Tillet. The vinification is the same. 1 year in barrels and 6-8 months in tank, in inox tank. With during the first year, I have 15% of new oak and French oak always, and yeah.
What's the total production on the Blagny, Antoine? How much do you make?
I'm sorry.
What's the total production?
I have a half hectare. So I produce 10, 12 barrels each year.
And there was another question earlier, I just want to not miss it. We've obviously been talking a lot about 2015 and 2017. And Maureen was just asking if you could also compare or talk about your opinions on 2016 and 2018, just as a,
2016 is it was very, very difficult vintage. We started the vintage by the first in April, 27 April, and we lost. Sometimes we lost 70% of the vintage, and it was very, very difficult. And the problem with the first, the vines is stopped during 2 weeks, and after the 2 weeks, you have the retard after during the harvest. So the harvest was later than 15 or 17, and I don't remember, Charles, but it was we started in 20 20 September. I don't remember.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And you have good acidity in 16. The balance is perhaps like it's difficult to compare, but it's a mix of 13 and 14 perhaps. For me, the vinification in 16 was during 20 months in barrels. No tank, just 1 month for the bottling, just before the bottling, but 20 months in barrels, because you have the freshness in the wines, you have the acidity, and it's not big maturity. So it's a classic wine, classic vintage in 16. And 18 was very it's a big surprise, because it was perhaps the first vintage since 40 years ago, with a good quantities. We had a good flowering, and the summer was dry, very dry, but June, July was very dry, but we had a lot of rain in May, and we had in 4 days we had 150 millimeters of rain in 4 days, and we had rain in August, 3 weeks before the harvest, and the grapes was very big at the harvest. It's similar to 82 vintage, so 82 was very good vintage for the white wines, and 18 is a little bit similar, perhaps less quantities of 82, but similar. And today the bottling of 18 was last March, and I keep the wines 13 months in barrels, and 6 months in tank.
I must admit, Garrett and I having dinner with Charles, and we asked him how was 2018, and he just couldn't stop smiling.
That's right.
I said,
I remember that.
It's the vintage of a lifetime, so quality and quantity, and I think it's another vintage that I think people will look back on and have some really nice surprises.
Yeah.
Thank you, Antoine. We've got one more wine to come from you a little later. We're back to Charles again, and we're swapping villages now. So we're moving all the way over to Chassaing-Montrachet. It must take at least 5 minutes to get there.
Yeah.
And this is the Chassaing-Montrachet Premier Cru Morgeau Tête de Clos, or Tête du Clos, and Charles can perhaps explain the importance of the Tête du Clos element of this wine. And again, it's a 2017 vintage.
Yeah. So Chassaing-Montrachet. So we make 1 hectare in Chassaing-Montrachet. So it's Chassaing-Montrachet Tête du Clos. Chassaing-Montrachet, it's very Montrachet. It's very big appellation it's the biggest appellation in Chassaing. And we have a lieu-dit in the appellation. So we can find Grand Clos, Petit Clos, Tête du Clos. So this is Tête du Clos, and it's quite a special part. It's not a long. Is not a long parcel, but very large, and it will be very special soil. It's not really typical from the main part of Chassagne. It will be very. We will find a very big minerality, and it's a white soil. We keep more humidity, more water in these parcels than the other, compared to Mersault, for example, and so we will find a very big minerality, because the soil in this area is the rock is very soft, and when we have a weather like 16 with 13, yeah, why 16 was quite special, but when we have some water, we will have more minerality, a lot of minerality for the wet vintage. So it gives a very fresh wine, and very intense, and very very nice acidity always, and very good balance. But it's fresher than Mersault. It's a little bit lighter than Mersault, but it's always on the fruit. Very good flavor. It's quite a special parcel for us. It's coming from the family of my mother. The family of my mother had many parcels in Mersault, and they had all the tête de clos at the beginning. It's special because the parcels my father take back the parcels in 71, 72, something like that, and we had to replant a very small part. And when I came back, we choose the best plant, because many plant wasn't very good. The roots going just on the top of the soil, but they didn't go deeper. So we had to choose the good plant, and to take off the bad one. So it was a big job during many years to keep the whole vines and replant every year, just a very small part, just to choose few plants like this. So that was the biggest job in these parcels, because at the beginning the wine was really lighter. It was too light, not a big concentration, and now we put less and less new oak, and we just have the very good balance. Is coming to be better every year.
Yeah, this was a wine, Charles, we didn't buy for a few years actually, and I think it was either the 16 or 17 when we started buying it, and suddenly it was like, wow, you know, how long have you been making this wine? It suddenly seemed to just take on this wonderful minerality and purity, and yeah, it's looking really terrific.
At the beginning, we sold a lot to the negociation, because it wasn't the biggest appellation for us. I mean, we was more special in Mersault. It was own specialty, and we had more vines. Now we have a little bit more than 10 hectares, and now it's quite a big part of the domain. We had a part in red, and we replanted. So now it's quite a big parcels. So we try to make a big cuvée now of Chassagne Mersault, and sometimes when we had a new buyer like you, and we didn't present all the time Chassagne, and now we have a good cuvée, so we present it, and we have a very good good business with the Chassagne in many countries now. Right? So we keep more and more every year.
And Charles, do you pick in Chassagne later or earlier in Mersault or around the same time? Or
actually, it depends of the year. Usually, it's later than Mersault. It's quite it's quite funny because people in Chassagne pick generally earlier than me, but I wait always a little bit for Chassagne because in the white soil the maturity is going quite slowly, and it looks always already very early because the grapes are yellow, but in fact it's not at the maturity, not at the end. So we always wait a little bit, but it depends of the year. 16 we had a lot of frost in a big part of the parcel, so the maturity was going very fast. So we picked on the first, and it depends. It depends of the vintage, but in general it's later than Mersault. So the first parcels where we pick in general it's Volnay-Centenot for the red, because it's already ready very early, and Boucher, Perrières, and in the middle of the harvest we would pick Chassagne.
There's a question there, Charles, for you as well about you talked earlier about Mersault and the minerality of the wines, and Josh saying he also associates Chassagne with being very mineral. Would you say in terms of the terroir, in terms of stones or rocks or limestone, they're similar or they're different? And
the soil is very different. In the Tête de Clos, it's completely different. So you don't have to be a specialist or something like that. It just look at the soil and you will see the difference. The soil is white in the Chassagne Mersault, and the rock you can crush it very easy. And no, it's completely different. In general, in Mersault, you will have a rock, a stronger rock, and dark, not dark, but red soil a little bit. It depends of the area. If you compare to Charmes, Genévrières, Perrières, of course it would be different. But you can see really the difference. The difference is so big in Chassagne, in these parcels in Chassagne, I mean.
Great. Thanks, Charles. Okay, so we're on to the last wine of this evening, and we thought Polini deserved to have a little spot on this tasting. So back to you, Antoine, for the 2017, your first sample of 17 this evening, and the Polini Premier Cru Champguin.
Yes, Polini Montrachet, les Champguin. I bought the vine in 2011. I had the opportunity, and it's a very small vine. I produce only 0.13 hectares, so I produce only 1-2 barrels each year, so very low quantity. And my first vintage was 11. In 2012, I had not production because the hail destroyed all the grapes. And I produced only until 2017. No, yes, 17. And I uprooted the vines after the harvest, and I will replant in 2021. So now I don't produce the Polini Les Champguin. it was I uprooted the vines because the rootstock was not good. It was SO4. SO4 it's very good during 30-35 years, but after the vine was not very good, and you produce very small grapes, and it's not interesting. It's the good year I produce 1.5 barrels each year, so it was very low. And the terroir of Shanghai is you have a lot of rock, a lot of limestone. You don't have clay, perhaps 20 centimeters of clay, and a lot of rock. It's hard rock. It's very difficult to cook the soil, and with I don't know the word labour, labourer les vignes, Jason.
Christ, good. I don't know either. So, yeah. to work the vines or
the soil.
Yeah.
The soil, yes.
Okay.
And yes, it's very work the soil. Yeah.
Work the soil.
Thank you. And yes, it's very difficult because the altitude of clay is very low. I have not a big history with Shanghai because, like I say, it's new for me. But Puligny Shanghai, it's just below the hameau de Blagny. It's the first vines in Puligny, and just above Folatière, Puligny Folatière. And when you taste the vines, it's a lot of powerful in mouth, and it's not very acid. You have a little bit reduction in nose, but very the typicity of the vines is powerful. The reduction go out after 2 minutes in the glass, and yeah, you can smell a little bit yet, but yeah, little bit reduction. You smell, yeah. It's not for me the vinification was like 15 with a lot of tank, inox tank, and you smell 2015 the reduction was not present, but in 17 it's too early now to taste, so you smell a little bit reduction, but in few months, perhaps 1 year, you will not have the reduction.
Gareth, I think you've got
There was a question there. I'm sorry, I'm just going to catch up. So Antoine, have you seen the characters of different appellations changing with climate change? So I think you mentioned a bit in Blagny you'd seen a change, but in general, maybe you've seen a difference with climate change in terms of
Yes. But me, like I said a few minutes, I like the big maturity. So for me, it's better than 20 years. But yes, the typicity of the white wines and red wines, but of the Burgundy wines change a lot. Yeah, you have not a big acidity like 88, like 84, like 81, and but it was during the 70s or the 80s. My father said me it was very difficult because the harvest was in October, sometimes with the frost, sometimes with snow, and it was very difficult. Today it's perhaps too early, but I think the quality is better, is more regular now. It's always easy. We have not mildew. We have not sometimes odium, but it's very rare. 20, 30 years ago, it was not every year, but very, very often. And yeah, for us, wine grower, winemaker, it's very easier. It's easier, but yes, you smell the wines differently. It's very, very different.
Yeah. And I think I'm just going to adjust Maureen's question slightly about international competitors. So Chardonnays from around the world, maybe both of you, is there any particular regions or countries that you rate, you think are doing a good job? Is it California or Australia, or can you pick one or two places you like? Or
yeah, it's yes. Perhaps it's more similar to California or South Africa, but we have the only character in Burgundy. It's the limestone, and perhaps it's not the weather is not like California, but it's sometimes very hot. But we have the limestone, and we have always the minerality in the wines. In 15, it was very odd vintage, but you smell the minerality, and I don't think it's similar in California or South Africa. Or we are very lucky for that with the coast of limestone.
sure. Which country who produce top Chardonnay do you like the best? Do you like, is it California or is it South Africa? Is it Australia? Have you got a
Burgundy?
It's still Burgundy, okay.
No,
Charles, same question. Anywhere you like? No, just Burgundy. Anywhere else?
Yeah, Burgundy. I like all the wine when it's good, but Burgundy, it's, you cannot find.
Have you tasted any wine made with Chardonnay from anywhere in the world that you enjoyed?
No, I enjoyed a lot of. I liked Sauvignon from New Zealand because I worked there, so it was great. It was very typical. I think it was very. They made their vines and their wines, and it was good. But it's so different. The soil is so different, and you cannot not have the same result in California and Burgundy, definitely, because when you see the soil, it's good, but the techniques is so different. The techniques of vinification is so different, and we cannot put some irrigation in Burgundy. It's just we have to work with the weather every day, and in California you have no question. The weather, it's always very good, and you put some water, you put some. So it's different. It's completely different, and the soil is completely different. When you use the irrigation, of course you can have a very good soil if you give some water easy to the vines. The root is going just on the and they don't go very deep. Just So you will have not the same concentration, and it's wine from enology and not wine from the terroir. And for me, it's just my opinion, but I work there as well, and we can see the difference of work. But you can find definitely very good wine everywhere. But I think in all the terroir in France, it's very interesting because it's we have many different mostly in Burgundy. If you do 10 meters, the soil will be different. It's a result of a million years ago of different movement of the height of the rock, of the mountain, of the element.
Great, thank you, Charles. Well, we've slightly overrun, I think. But I may be a little biased, but to be honest, I could have probably kept going for another hour. That was a truly fantastic tasting. I think I've never, as a group of wines, the extract, the saltiness, the energy, the liveliness, the mouth-watering quality of all 6 wines was fantastic. We've seen 2 very different vintages there, but I think what Antoine has done with the 15s is fantastic. They're so fresh and vibrant. That was a truly great tasting. Thank you for that. And I think, I didn't say it at the beginning, but I think both of you, obviously, grown up together in Mersault, and you both seem to be very much at the top of your game. And I think it's been a real privilege to listen to you speak this evening and taste these wines. So thank you very much. Just from a bit of housekeeping, I think 1 or 2 of these wines might still be available to buy. Email probably following in the morning. Things like Geneviève, you won't find anywhere, any bottles whatsoever. But thank you, Antoine. Thank you, Charles. That really was fantastic.